mind, I want to go get my tea.
Sure. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Judith Giesberg. She is a professor at Villanova. She has her PhD from Boston College, and she's an expert in the history of women and gender during the US Civil War, but I consider her one of Philadelphia's premier experts on the Civil War, Black history, and women's issues. And she spoke before here about the Institute of Colored Jews, but today she's speaking about Emilie Davis's Diaries. And please welcome Judith Giesberg.
Thank you, Diane. Can everybody hear me? Great, okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Diane, again for inviting me and for you all for coming today. Thanks for the thumbs up. And I think we did a brief AV check, and it looks like you can probably also see the slides all right. That's great. I might click off at some point of the PowerPoint to show you a website so that you can go and explore these diaries yourself sometime if you like as well. But I'll try to stick to the slideshow first so we don't lose anything in the process of clicking back and forth. So I'm really pleased. As I told Diane, I look for any opportunity to talk about this amazing diary that is at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. And it is really an extraordinary resource for studying the Black community in Philadelphia during the Civil War, for understanding how African Americans, living in the North experienced some of the Civil War's most sort of, epic moments. And so we are really, really fortunate to have this source here in Philadelphia to give us, a ground level, snapshots throughout the war of what it was like for Philadelphia's Black community to live through this, this time. As Diane was talking, as you all were hopping on to the Zoom, it's very, very rare to find a diary of this sort. This is a diary kept not by an elite slaveholding woman in the South during the Civil War, which, are the vast majority of those that were published in the aftermath of the war were written by women who were enslavers who lived in, the South during the Civil War. And there are many, many, many of those diaries. So over, the 150 plus years that scholars have been studying the Civil War, they've really relied on those diaries written by slaveholding women to understand what the war was, and that really skews what it is that that scholars think they know about the war, when we have relied so heavily on this small minority of the population for understanding what the war is. For more average Americans, and certainly for women of color, whether free or enslaved, there are very few sources, like this. There are a lot of sources that will give you just a brief snapshot of somebody's life, but to have 3 years of a diary written by a free Black woman is really quite extraordinary. And so this source is really valuable to us, any of us who are interested in any of those topics, whether it's African American history, whether it's the history of Philadelphia, whether it's women, the Civil War, studying, emancipation. All of those topics really, Emilie Davis's diary is really a great source for it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the diary. I won't talk for too long, as I really want to engage you all in your questions and the kinds of projects that you're interested in and working on. So what you're looking at here is an image of the diaries. These are 3 very small leather-bound volumes that, as I said to you before, are kept at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. It's not entirely clear how these diaries survived or in whose hands, but the Historical Society of Pennsylvania acquired them in the early 2000s via an auction. And these diaries now are safely in the hands of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. There are many, many questions about the diaries that remain unanswered, but for sure we have these 3 volumes with which we can begin to answer some of the questions that we might have. So you're looking at the images there of the diaries. You know, years before I started working on these diaries, I was at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania working on another project that Diane and I were just talking about. It's a book that I wrote several years back. And one of the librarians said, hey, you're working on women, you should really see these diaries. And she brought these diaries out and said, you know, this is something you need to look at. And I am forever grateful to this librarian, this archivist at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania for introducing me to the diaries. And I opened them up, and what I found was, you know, something really quite extraordinary. And I decided at that time what I really wanted to do was give that project enough time. So I needed to finish up this other thing that I was working on. And then years later came back to the diaries. And so here they are. And let me just take you on a little tour of these diaries. They are quite small. This slide can give us the mistaken impression that we're looking at our giant volumes. And they are not giant volumes. In fact, this is the size of the diaries. So if you have a smartphone on your desk, like I do, it's probably much bigger than these diaries. My smartphone feels like it's giant. These are meant to be handheld and meant to, you know, be held in somebody's pocket. And these were pocket-sized diaries here being held by one of my students at Villanova to give us, who was working on this project, to give us a sense of just how small we're talking about.
Dr. Giesberg, I had one participant that just sent a chat saying that she can't hear. You know, but I think your volume is turned up, but could you turn your volume up a little bit? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going on with that.
It's all the way up. Are folks having a hard time hearing me?
I'm not having any trouble.
Okay.
I can hear you fine.
Okay. Everybody in my family tells me that I'm shouting all the time, so I'm always really surprised when somebody's like, I'm having trouble.
I just wanted to address that issue, but you know, I can hear it, so
okay.
I don't know what to say. Yeah.
Diane, this is Kevin, and you
Yes.
are coming in way louder than our speaker. So your voice is about 5 times as loud.
Okay, it should be fine though. Is anybody else?
Okay.
Regina, can you hear?
It's fine on mine.
Yeah, so on some people's it's fine. I don't know what to do. And Dr. Giesberg has her sound turned completely up.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
Everything's up.
It sounds fine.
Great.
Thanks, Connie. Okay, Kevin, I'm really sorry.
I'll keep shouting as much.
That's okay. I'll just hold my.
Yeah, Dr. Giesberg can just yell. That's good.
Get my megaphone.
Okay, go ahead. I'm really sorry.
It's fine. No, it's fine. It's all good. Right, so you're getting a look at the diaries here to give you a sense of the size of the diaries. These are diaries that, you know, this is the sort of front page of the diary. These are sort of pre-printed volumes that seem to have been mass produced, that you would have purchased at a store or somebody would have given to you as a gift. And then they became your personal diary. And what you're looking at here is the front page of Emilie Davis's diary. And the 3 volumes that we have at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania are for 1863, 1864, and 1865. So this is the very first page of what we know to be the earliest extant diary written by Emilie Davis. And as you can see at the top of this slide here, she writes her name. And here is, she also writes it on the inside cover of the diary. And here we have sort of the clearest image that we could grab of her writing her name. And we've blown it up here for you to see it, because I just think it's extraordinary for people who want to know who this woman is. We don't have any images of Emilie Davis. We have not been able to locate a photograph of her, although we know there are a lot of photographers working in Philadelphia during the Civil War. We know that photography in general was becoming much more open to many more people. We have not been able to find any images of Emilie Davis, which is too bad. But we do have her handwriting here and her name, which I just love. It's the way she kind of writes her name in these big loopy letters with the kind of double loop on her E, and then that sort of glorious dotting of the I with this little flourish. And it's as a historian, those little clues are meaningful to us, I think, to all of us, right, about what the act of writing was meant for her, right, to write her name in this diary. It means something. Obviously meant something to her, and it should mean something to us as we read her diary. So let me give you a little bit of another look at the diary. Now, this is not going to be very visible in your screen, and it is not very visible on the pages of the diary either. But this is just to give you a sense of what the actual diary pages look like. So for each week in that very small diary, Emilie had 2 pages to write on, and she filled every space that she could in the diary, and wrote every day, and sometimes the days bled into the next day, and she filled in all of the spaces of the diary pages. And if you flipped to the back of the diary, there were these sort of memoranda pages where you could sort of just add things that couldn't fit into the week, and those were always filled as well. So we're talking about very, very packed diaries. And you're probably thinking, like I was thinking as I saw these diaries, this is awesome, but I have awful eyes. And how in the world am I going to be able to read these diaries? This is where a few, very important allies come into this process, and really collaborators. The first was that early on, when we were sort of at the moment when historians started to think about what it meant to be 150 years out of the Civil War, we sat down at a planning meeting, and people said, what are the sources we need to understand the Civil War today? And this was just, not long after I'd seen these diaries at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. So I put that down on one of our lists of things we most want to look at to understand the war in this big planning session at Penn State. And then Penn State began this very ambitious digitization project where they took things off our much wanted list and began digitizing these sources. So they digitized Emilie Davis's diary, which was yay, so exciting. Because that meant a few things, right? Because these diaries are teeny and they live at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, the idea of sort of getting in to start to work with them was very intimidating. If we, as a digitized source, I could bring in a bunch of people, right? I could sit down with a group of people, and we could all look at the diary pages, and we could manipulate them and begin to read the writing, which sometimes is very clear when it's written in pen. Sometimes it's written in pencil and it becomes harder to see. Plus it's teeny, like I said, it's small, and I'm old and just getting older. So with the digitized version of the diary, I brought it to Villanova to my graduate students and said, okay, guys, let's see what we can do and see if we can read the diary together. So over about a year and a half, this group of graduate students all signed up to do this project. And over that year and a half, we read the diary pages and transcribed the diary and built a website which you can go to today that still lives on the web. It's davisdiaries.villanova.edu. And you can see the work of that transcription. So we transcribed Emilie Davis's diaries and preserved the original pages of the digitized diary. So you can see the original page on the diary. You can see our transcription. The transcription, the diary the website went live on January 1st, 2013, which was 150 years to the day of the first day of the diary. So we timed it so that it would, the diary would go live when, the website would go live when the diary, the 150th anniversary of the diary. We also wanted to get it out there because we knew there was a lot of stuff in the diary that we couldn't understand, that we hadn't been able to decipher. So we wanted it to be out there for folks who know about Philadelphia's history, who might be able to sort of jump in and help us with some of the reading that we couldn't do. The diary's full, for instance, of surnames and personal names that are that we don't know what they are, and we don't know who these people are. And we know there's a lot of folks out there who are very well informed about the history of the city. So we really wanted this to be a collaborative project. So we did as much of the transcription as we could do. We did a lot of annotating when we could figure out whose lecture she went to go see or what national or local event she was referring to. We did that annotation. And then we put it up on the web and have invited people in. And people have been part of this process since 2013. Began to write in almost immediately and say, "Oh, I know who that person is. She mentions, in March of 1865." And people have come forward with other sorts of leads, and it's been really that kind of collaborative process right from the very beginning, working on these diaries. It's been something that is very enjoyable. It's one thing sitting around and writing, stuff yourself, and it's so much more rewarding to invite in not only students, but the larger community to come in and to work on this project with us. And that's what the Davis Diaries have been from the beginning. So when you start to investigate the website, which I hope you do, you'll see that what you're looking at is the results of a lot of people's efforts to understand this young woman, the references that she's making in her diary. This picture here is that first page of the diary, January 1st, 1863, which all of you know was the day that President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, the final version of it, was issued. And that's the first day of the diary that we have. And as you can see there, Emilie Davis says on January 1st, 1863, "Today has been a memorable day. And I thank God I have been spared to see it. The day was religiously observed. All the churches were open. We had quite a jubilee." So this is Emilie Davis already giving us a clue about what it was like to be part of the Black community on the day that the Emancipation Proclamation was issued in Philadelphia, and all the Black churches celebrated the beginning of emancipation, which was going to mean something not only for the 3.5 million, 4 million enslaved Americans, but for Americans of color throughout the nation, understood that emancipation set the country on a different trajectory, and it should have had meaningful effects on all their lives. And you can see that in the celebrations that Emilie Davis went to, that other free Blacks did in other parts of the North. So so that's the website where you can start to explore the diary yourself. And when you do, you're going to, like me, learn a lot more about the free Black community of Philadelphia than you likely knew before. There were many people who I met through her diary that I did not know. So, and things that I learned that, that made me look at the Civil War differently. And I hope that will do that for you as well. There's the lawnmower. I'm so sorry. I knew it was coming. I'll just keep screaming and leaning in. Emilie Davis lived in the 7th Ward, and she makes a lot of references in the diary to churches and other locations in that community. And you can see, if you can see it on your laptop, we map some of those reference those places that she attends, a couple of the churches she attends, and where we believe she attended school. So, Philadelphia's Black community was quite large. It was the largest Black community in the antebellum North, with something like 20,000 free Blacks living in Philadelphia. This was a very vibrant community with, with strong institutions that had been in the city since the beginning of the city. And Emilie Davis was living in that community as a young free Black woman. And so here are some of the places that are important to her. And Diane, if anytime anybody chats and they want to interrupt me, please, I'm happy to.
Yes, I'm just looking at the chat. I think it's mostly about who can hear. So if we get questions, I had a question though. Was the diary written in pencil?
Some of the diary pages were written in pencil and some of them were written in pen. Okay. Yeah. And some of those pages, some of the pencil pages are really, really hard to read. When you go onto the website, you can see some of those are pretty hard to read. Yeah. Oh,
Regina Robinson is asking if you could point out some of the places on the map. We talk about the 7th Ward in our Deep Rivers tour because W.E.B. Du Bois did that map of the 7th Ward, but yes. This is interesting. Yeah, great. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Dr. Giesberg.
Absolutely. So I don't know how well you'll be able to see it on your screen, but we do have this actually in the book as well, which I think we're auctioning off a copy of.
Yes, we are. Dr. Giesberg is donating a copy to the lucky winner.
So number 1, the little arrow in number 1, we think is the home of, it's on Rodman Street, the home of Emilie Davis's brother. One of her brothers, Elijah, lived there on 1919 Rodman Street is number 1 on your screen. Number 2 on your screen is Bainbridge Street, which is the location, 900 Bainbridge Street, which is the location of the Institute for Colored Youth, where Emilie Davis attended classes in the evenings. Number 3 is the home, another home. Her brother lived in 2 different locations. And so that was another one of the homes of her brother, Elijah. And then the number 4 is 9th and Lombard, which is Central Presbyterian Church. And then number 5, which is 7th, below Shippen, which is a different Presbyterian church. And then of course, number 6 is the mothership, Mother Bethel, which of course everybody knows where that is, and it's still in the very same place. So Emilie Davis is very involved in this community and very active in several different churches. She attended a couple of different churches, and then she also went to meetings at Mother Bethel, and also attended lectures in other parts of the city too, not just the 7th Ward. So the map shows us a little bit of the orientation of Emilie Davis's life, but she did not just sort of live and exist in the 7th Ward. She also worked and lived and was part of the larger life of the city as well, as the 7th Ward that you're looking at here at this map, in this map. So who is this young woman who we're looking at her diary and you might not necessarily know a lot about. So Davis was 22 years old when the Civil War began, and she earned her living working as a seamstress and also caring for the children of elite white Philadelphians. She also seemed to have attended classes, as I suggested to you, from what we can tell, at the Institute for Colored Youth, which, during the day, was the place where the premier school for Black youth. And so families, from across the city, wanted to send their children, Black families wanted to send their children to the Institute for Colored Youth. Which was, as all of you know, right, a very competitive school where, it was very difficult to graduate from the Institute for Colored Youth. And really the best of the best, the cream of the crops, really were the ones who could graduate from the Institute for Colored Youth. Emilie Davis attended it on a part-time basis. We have no evidence to suggest that she graduated as a domestic servant, right? Sort of full-time domestic servant, working, taking care of other people's children, working as a seamstress. This was something that she did when she had time and when she had the means. But what's extraordinary, of course, about this institution is that she got to rub elbows with all of those civil rights luminaries that went to the Institute for Colored Youth, people like Octavius Catto and Jacob C. White, who also walked through those doors and studied there. But so did free Black people with less of the sort of resources than some of these folks did. And by resources, I mean sort of families, right, who were well connected in the civil rights communities of Philadelphia. And Davis was not that. From what we can tell, right, Davis's father was from Maryland, and a couple of her brothers were born in Maryland. So we're not entirely clear sort of what their status was when they first came to Pennsylvania. Davis was likely born free, but her father might not have been, and at least one of her older brothers might not have been as well. We have no idea who Emilie Davis's mother was. We were never able to find any information out about her mother. And so what we're thinking about when we think about Emilie Davis here, we sort of think about a blended family where clearly some of the members of the Davis family were born free, but others of them might have been actually born enslaved, or sort of quasi-free. So this is so she's sort of very differently situated than an Octavius Catto or the larger white family. She's sort of straddling that free, unfree kind of border. And that's going to shape the way she responds to some of the events of the war as well. Of course, there's no battles fought, in Philadelphia during the Civil War. But as we're reading the diaries, we can see the way the war enters into Emilie Davis's life. One of her brothers, the war takes away one of her brothers from her, and she nearly lost her father during the war. When Lee's Army of Northern Virginia invades South Central Pennsylvania in the summer of 1863 in what will be called the Gettysburg Campaign, Emilie Davis's brother and father are outside of Harrisburg. So when news comes that there's a Confederate army in the state of Pennsylvania, close to her father, right? Davis is understandably very nervous and very concerned about the status of her family that could get caught in the way of that Confederate army, which all of you know, of course, right? Robert E. Lee wasn't just coming into Pennsylvania to fight the Union Army, but he was also kidnapping free Black Pennsylvanians and selling them into slavery. So she had every reason to be concerned about her father, as did a lot of other free Black people living in Philadelphia whose family members got in the way of that army. So this is sort of the situation that Emilie Davis is in when the war begins. So over the years over that year and a half or so, we worked on these diaries and we transcribed them and we started to sort of unpack what it was like for Emilie Davis to live through this, these big events of the Civil War. And she gave us different perspective on how to think about it, right? So when I teach the Civil War in my classes at Villanova, it's a 3-day event, right? It begins on July 1st, it ends on July 3rd. But when you're reading Emilie Davis's diary, it goes on for weeks because she knows, she starts to write about her, about refugees coming in from Pennsylvania, from Harrisburg, coming in on the trains to Philadelphia. And she's worried about what that means for her father. And then she doesn't get any letters from her father for weeks. And she writes in the diary, still no letter from father. And for her, the Gettysburg campaign goes on until she hears from her father and she knows he's safe. So that's really, that was really a really important moment. And I think when you read the diary, it changes the way you think about something like that. We also got to, like I said, feel the excitement of what it was like to be in the city when the Emancipation Proclamation was announced. We also read in the diaries, and you will as well, if you take a look at them, what it was like to hear the news, the awful news that the president had been shot. So in April of 1865, she's actually at a Ladies' Aid Society meeting when she hears that Lincoln has been shot. And then, it's not sort of the immediate news that he's dead. And then she sort of goes to the memorandum pages and says that, that sort of her follow-up that came in on the evening news, that in fact Lincoln died, and she talks about about this Confederate assassin who killed him. And you can sort of read from these diary entries the sort of tension about what that meant. Did that mean the Emancipation Proclamation? What did that mean for the Emancipation Proclamation? Because that was Lincoln's thing, and was that going to be taken away? And then of course when Lincoln's funeral catafalque comes through Philadelphia, Emilie Davis goes to try to see Lincoln's open casket twice. She waits in line for hours so that she can see Lincoln's body, and then she finally does get to see him, and it's an important moment for her to go see Lincoln, and as it was for a lot of other Black Philadelphians to go and see Lincoln and pay their respects. So it's an important diary for us to sort of think about what we don't usually think about when we think about the war, how it was lived on a very personal level by many people, and Davis does that for us. We also, get to sort of see the choices that she makes during the war. So the lectures that she attends, for instance, who she goes to listen to, and who she doesn't necessarily go to listen to. So she, for instance, goes to see lectures by a former slave and a fiery minister, James Sella Martin. She goes to see a lecture by Martin. Of course, every time Frederick Douglass comes to town, she definitely lines up to go see Frederick Douglass. I don't know about you, but if Frederick Douglass came to town now, I'd line up pretty, I'd stand in a long line to go see Frederick Douglass myself. And she does as well.
Dr. Giesberg, what I thought was sort of what just struck me is she calls him Fred.
Yes, she does.
Fred Douglass.
That's right.
We would never think of calling him Fred Douglass.
Yeah,
Fred, I'm going to see Fred Douglass. So
I know. Can you imagine raising your hand and saying, "Excuse me, Fred, I have a question"?
I can't imagine. No.
Yeah. Well, it kind of makes you wonder too. Like maybe that's what, I don't know. Maybe people called him Fred. Maybe that's
they must have.
Fred. I would do a double take if anybody called him Fred.
Yes.
His name.
Yes.
Yeah. She also went to go see Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, poet and feminist. She went to go hear her give a lecture. she doesn't seem to have gone to see William Kelly, who was a Republican from Pennsylvania, who was very pro sort of Black civil rights, but he also was known to lecture too long, like just go on and on and on and on. And I always think about him. I always think about him when I'm giving one of these talks. Like, don't be William Kelly. Don't talk too long, Judy. So I'm not going to be William Kelly, I promise. But she didn't go see him when he came to Philadelphia at one time to give a talk. He was there a lot because he was into Black recruiting. He was often showing up with Fred Douglass and others to encourage Black Philadelphians to enlist in the army. But she didn't go and see him. And then we also learned about other people in the diary that, you know, all sorts of people I didn't know anything about, and maybe you all did. She went to go see Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield sing, and Greenfield was an amazing, you know, classically sort of trained, singer. She had an amazing voice. And was just supposed to have been like, somebody who we wish we had a recording of, to have heard her perform. She was known to open for Frederick Douglass. So people would come to, you know, go to a Frederick Douglass lecture, but they would treat it to this amazing treat where Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield performed first. She was known as the Black Swan. And because of Emilie Davis, I got to hear more, I got to learn about her. I was just checking to see because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget anybody on there. Let's see. Yeah. I'm going to talk about Blind Tom, so I didn't forget him, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget anybody else. So when did she go see? Yeah, here it is. So she went to these different concerts. Let's see. Oh yeah, May 11th, 1864 was one of the times that she went to go see. She went to go see Greenfield, and she says in her diary, Nellie, who was one of her BFFs in the diary. We don't know who she is. She's one of the people we don't know. Did not come up as I expected this evening. Miss Greenfield's concert came off tonight. So she went to go see Mrs. Greenfield. And I didn't know who she was when I first read that. And I thought, okay, well, now I need to know who this Greenfield is. So she was a former slave from Natchez, Mississippi. And sometime before the war, she moved from Mississippi to Pennsylvania, came to Philadelphia. And this was well before the Civil War. And then she came into a family of Quakers. And she could sing all the classical sort of music of the time, and she opened up a lot for Douglass over the years. I did not know about her until Emilie Davis introduced me to her. We also met through Emilie Davis's diary. Somebody who she refers to as Blind Tom in the diary, and that was actually his stage name. In September of 1865, Davis writes in her diary that she went to go see Blind Tom perform. So Blind Tom was actually a man named Thomas Wiggins, who was formerly an enslaved man, who toured concert halls and performed musical numbers that he had learned from memory because he was visually impaired. And Tom, it turns out, is a really interesting character. He was this awe-inspiring talent where he could perform two different songs on two different pianos at the same time, and then he could sing a third song.
Oh.
So you can just imagine what how amazing and magical it would have been to see him perform. And he was extraordinarily popular. People, lined up to go see Blind Tom perform. And we read about him we looked at some white Philadelphians' diaries, and lo and behold, they talk about Blind Tom as well in their diaries. So he was a quite popular character. Davis writes in her diary, much pleased with the performance when she went to go see Blind Tom. And then here, we got to listen to this part. She says, excepting we had to sit upstairs, which made me furious. So this is September of 1865. This is after the war. And Davis goes to see Blind Tom, and she is set in the very same lecture hall where she had gone to go see Frederick Douglass, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. She had sat on the main floor. She was sent to the segregated section of the theater, and she was furious. And we can see those breakthrough moments in the diary where she's not just sort of reporting on the news, but she's also editorializing on the racism of white Philadelphia. That's one example where she was quite upset about about that. And there are other moments like that as well. You know, other things that we sort of get to live through Emilie Davis's eyes. She's young, you know, she is a young 20-something, if you will, living in the city, and she has friends, and she has a boyfriend who, if you read the book, I don't want to spoil anything, but the boy's name is Vincent, and Vincent is a very good boyfriend. And is very attentive to Emilie Davis, and she does spend a lot of time with Vincent. I won't tell you about how the story ends because you're just going to have to buy the book or win the book or go to the diary on the website. You know, she and there's intrigue, right? Sometimes some of her friends fight, and she talks about them and refers to them as you know, like gets into the middle of a fight only in her diary. She refers to friends who get Frenchy, which I think probably means that it's not good, right? If a friend gets Frenchy, it's not a good thing. She also goes and has ice cream, right? There's something in the diet. Because we were sort of creating a website, we did things, you know, like tagging. So there are things we wouldn't have even thought about asking, but we started tagging words like ice cream, and we realized, whoa, Emilie Davis likes ice cream. We've tagged that a few times, and that got us thinking what it would be like in the segregated city where a lot of proprietors didn't open their doors to Black Philadelphians. And the fact that she gets ice cream a few times is not just, you know, us going to the Dairy Queen to get ice cream. This is about a Black woman in 19th century Philadelphia who probably had to think pretty carefully about where she could go get ice cream. In fact, this sent us looking at Charlotte Fortin's diaries, and Charlotte Fortin is another Black diarist from Philadelphia. And in her diary, Fortin talks about going several places to try to get ice cream, and having a hard time getting anybody to serve her ice cream. Right, so it's not, you know, so it is an important moment to sort of think about what it meant to be living in a city in the midst of, you know, really big questions about civil rights, right? You know, would the war just change the status of 4 million enslaved Americans, or would there be a larger conversation begun about the rights of all Americans, Americans of color? And of course, you know, it turned out that it was in fact the latter, right? That the war did, you know, it certainly didn't change anything overnight, and there was a lot of backtracking. But through the diary, you can sort of, you know, the great thing about the diary is it slows history down, right? You're not sort of going through these 4 years and saying, bang, 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 these are the things that happened, and this is how it came out. But when you're living it day to day, it slows it down. You don't know what's going to happen next, and you can sort of think through these events with Emilie Davis. Right. So here's again the image of the diaries as they live at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. We created this website, and then we heard from people that what they really wanted was not a website, they wanted a book, right? That what they wanted to be able to do was hold it in their hands and read it. And so we produced from the transcriptions and the annotation a book called Emilie Davis's Civil War, which was published from Penn State University Press, and which you too can get at your favorite local bookstore whenever it is that you might be interested in taking a better look at it. So I am going to stop there because that is about as long as William D. Kelly might have lectured people in the city of Philadelphia if you would have gone to one of his lectures instead of going to Fred Douglass's. So yeah, so I'm going to stop there and see what sorts of questions you might have or things you want me to go back to.
Does anybody have questions? I also want to do the drawing, and I'm gonna try to draw for somebody who's here. I mean, I'm not gonna cheat, but then if I draw somebody who isn't here, I think we should get somebody who's here.
Oh, yes.
It's Connie, you won. So, I don't know, Dr. Giesberg, how you want to do it. Do you want me
I'm going to send it. Well, I'm going to ask Connie to tell me who she wants the book signed. It could be autographed or not autographed, and it can be sent to wherever she wants.
I interviewed you some time ago, and you gave me a copy of the book.
Oh.
And so,
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's right.
twice you've given me interviews, and I thank you for that. So I'm wondering if the book might go to someone who does not have a copy of it.
Okay, we'll pick somebody else. Okay, Kimberly Ryan isn't here.
There's a Kim here.
Oh, Kim, I think you won then. Kim, are you there?
She is here. She's on mute.
Okay, Kimberly, you win the book. I will look up your address on the,
Or you can put it in the chat, Kim, if you want to.
Kim, are you Regina's friend?
She's my friend,
Okay, so
Diane.
she purchased a ticket. I can just get her address from the ticketing thing.
She might have stepped away from her laptop. Maybe that's why. she's
Okay,
not
that's fine.
answering.
I will send Kimberly, I will send Dr. Giesberg her address
Great.
via email, and then Dr. Giesberg will mail you the book, Kim. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Now we're ready to take questions. Let me see if we.
I have a
Mercy.
question.
Yes.
Is there anything about food in the diary?
So probably not as much as you want to know about food if you're working on somebody who like your cookbook author. So I think no more than you, a lot less than you hear about weather. So too bad you're not writing about weather. There is a lot of, because they're very short diary entries, every time it's bad weather in Philadelphia, which shockingly happens a lot. Like it doesn't shock any of us to know that there's bad weather in Philadelphia. So if it's raining or snowing, we'll get a lot about that. We hardly get anything about food in the diary.
You mentioned ice cream, and I believe there was a Black confectioner who had a business.
I saw that. Did you notice that?
Yeah, so I think probably there was someone providing ice cream for everybody.
That must be where she went, because she so Fortin mentions not being able to get, being denied service, but Emilie Davis just talks about ice cream. So, and this is the interesting part too, is that so Davis is not always in Philadelphia proper. So sometimes she's actually taking care of a family. And I think for a while she might actually be in Germantown where she's taking care of some children.
And John Trower John Trower was Philadelphia's most preeminent caterer, and he did produce ice cream. So she may have gotten it there.
Yay, we solved another mystery. See, that's great. That is great. That was one of our, that's one of the things we thought. We really want to know where she's getting ice cream. And now I think you might have helped us.
So Regina Robinson